All right. So, like I mentioned previously, this is the second day, Development and Evaluation, New Frontiers in the Social Sector. This was a multi-day session, and this is our last day. This is our panel. This is our agenda for today. We're going to talk about a little bit about the program that we evaluated. We're going to talk about the mechanics behind it. That will be led by Kasia and Joanne. And then when this was developed, there was kind of what we call now a synthetic evaluation. And then John and I will talk about that process. And then I will talk a little bit of future steps based on the evaluation that we presented yesterday, and just kind of like give a little bit more insight as to where the literature on AI systems, on how to support early career STEM professionals, and my own expertise in program evaluation say that future directions of this nature of cross-disciplinary collaboration can go. These are our takeaways, just to kind of learn about more of the role for AI developers and the role for program evaluators into working with one another as this kind of marriage of disciplines, but a lot of learning insights for all three of us. And we just want to have an open discussion about those learning insights today. And again, as I mentioned prior to starting the recording, I truly believe that collaborations of this nature are just prone to happen. And I think evaluators in the social sector have a very unique language of outcomes, how they're developed, how they're organized, and computer science, the way I understand it is also an outcomes-based driven field. And I think one can learn from one another in the way that programs are made and programs are evaluated. But this is a little bit of a different program. This is an AI-based program. And for that and how it was constructed, I will transition it to Katya so that she could explain this a little bit to us as to how this chatbot was developed. And then we'll move on to program evaluation from there.
Thank you, Sonia. So before we go into talking about the RAG system, let's talk briefly about why we chose retrieval-augmented generation in the first place. So basically, standard LLMs, as we know them today, rely solely on parametric knowledge from their training, which has a fundamental limitation for any application where factual accuracy and also being specific to a certain domain are important. And so RAG in this case addresses that by retrieving relevant documents at inference time from a curated knowledge base from that field, ensuring that the responses are grounded in actual peer-reviewed evidence, which is really important. And so for a mentoring system like TrueNorth that is targeting early career STEM professionals, this distinction is really important. The system has to deliver guidance that's not just fluent and giving timely responses to the people using it, but those responses have to be grounded in the facts and they have to be defensible. So the knowledge base that we built for this has different peer-reviewed sources that span positive psychology, emotional regulation, conflict resolution, and leadership theory, and they are all curated around the PERMA+4 framework. Those documents are pre-processed via header-based chunking to preserve their contextual integrity as well. And then the embeddings are generated via Google Gemini text embedding 004, stored in SQL, and they are behind VPN restricted access. So on the left, you can see our 9-agent architecture, which starts with our query router, which classifies the intent of any question that is asked. And depending on what the user inputs, the question gets routed to either the internal knowledge base that we have, to the web search, or to a conversational agent. If the question is within scope and there are also documents that might cover it, it gets routed to that. If it is within the scope, but there is nothing fitting in the knowledge base, we route it to the web search. And then if the user goes off topic, it gets routed to that conversational agent to gently lead the conversation back to the topic. So the document retriever in the knowledge base performs a semantic similarity search over the vectorized knowledge base to retrieve relevant documents that could have information to answer the question that the user asked. And then the relevance grader, which is the agent next to it, scores those retrieved chunks using MMR, and it balances relevance versus redundancy, as well as RRF, where it aggregates those rankings. And depending on whether there is a pass or fail situation, either we proceed to the answer generator if the documents are graded relevant, or if they aren't, we proceed to the web search. So the answer generator is powered by Gemini 2.0 Flash, and it incorporates full conversation history, so we have mentoring continuity. And so once we have that answer, there is a hallucination checker, which is incredibly important, that cross-references the outputs against source documents. And it also validates any URLs that are used in the answer so that the users can have sources for the answer they're getting and they can read up more on it, look at those sources, and do their own research as well. And the answer evaluator that comes after that, after the hallucination checker, scores the responses against different design principles. There is also a query rewriter that is built in if the answer evaluator fails. And so the query is rewritten. And so then it can re-enter the retrieval pipeline and hopefully get a better answer. As I've already mentioned, after a certain time, if the answer is not deemed good enough, we also reroute to our chitter chatter agent, which is the same one where the query gets routed if it's deemed out of scope, and that maintains conversational flow, and it redirects towards substantive mentoring topics that the user could explore. And once there is either a good answer through the knowledge base or a web search or through that chitter chatter agent, that's where we reach the end and the answer is given to the user. And this is orchestrated via LangChain and also LangGraph for stateful and dynamic routing across all of those agents. And I will be passing it back to Sonia to talk a little bit more about the evaluation of our system now.
All right, so this is a little bit of what we talked about yesterday, is when we had this evaluation of 8 participants where we talked about use and we talked about the trust of participants and we talked about how we use participants' knowledge and attitudes of AI kind of as a baseline. And then we concluded that presentation yesterday, kind of explaining that there was a prior evaluation that set up the foundation for this. And I will actually bounce it to Joanne because she would better be able to speak further as to the very first evaluation that set the foundation for all of these. And then I'll talk about the results of that evaluation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sonia. So prior to any sort of human evaluation, we set up a artificial synthetic automated AI-driven evaluation that used synthetic data. So the way that this particular synthetic evaluation worked is that we first looked at literature and studied the meta requirements and design principles for synthetic evaluations of similar early career and education dialogue systems. And we found some common themes that were most important to early career step professionals. Some of these themes or categories are listed here, including professional development and career advancement, workplace dynamics and communication. The whole list is present on this slide. So we designed our synthetic evaluation around these themes. So as Katya mentioned previously, our AI chatbot is based off Google Gemini. Initially, we used Google Gemini to generate some synthetic questions to provide to our chatbot. But rather than having an AI evaluate itself, we used a different AI system called Anthropic Claude, which you may have seen in the news recently or maybe used yourself. And we asked Claude to generate 116 test questions that span these 14 themes that we previously identified in the literature reviews as common and important challenges experienced by early career professionals. Um, so each of these test cases included a realistic user question that they would potentially ask the chatbot, as well as a optimal response benchmark and a classification for that question across these particular categories. Um, if any of you are GitHub users, we do have our full set of 116 test questions present on GitHub, and you can see the queries that we presented to our chatbot. And then we use these queries to generate responses from the TrueNorth system and continued our evaluation from there. Um,
I believe at this point is where I came in the collaboration process, where I was kind of given the 116 case scenarios and then the 14 dimensions, and just to
mhm.
kind of use the insights to make sense of this responses. I can talk a little bit about the insights here, but if there's anything you'd like to say before that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess before we move on, I can give some example test prompts for those of you who are not too familiar with TrueNorth. So TrueNorth is optimized for early career STEM consulting or early career development for STEM professionals. And so a couple of the prompts that we would ask TrueNorth is, for example, I want to ask for a raise, but I'm worried that they'll say no or think I'm too proactive. That is a theme of impression management. Another one would say, I am concerned that I'm not technical enough to keep up with the senior scientists in data science. Another one would say, I get invited to meetings, but I would rarely get asked to speak. This feels like a very performative scenario, and I'm not sure how to deal with the situation. Another query that was generated by Claude to ask True North would be, my project manager keeps brushing off my ideas in our stand-ups. I am not too sure how to stand up for myself. How do I best proceed? So these are all example queries that were generated by Claude to evaluate True North with.
All right.
Mhm.
Um, so my job here is to tell you what we learned when we ran the chi-square statistics across these scores. So across the 116 scenarios, each of the scenarios carried a tag for the type of challenge that it represented, whether that would be mentorship, burnout, workplace conflict, and so on. And it was mentioned in the first day of this multi-day session, those were carried from the literature, from the leaky pipeline phenomenon with STEM retention. The question that we wanted to answer when we looked at the 14 dimensions across these problems was, is True North performance dependent on the type of challenge that is facing, or is it consistent across the board? And that is a categorical question. So when we're given a categorical question, uh, when we are given like a categorical question, where we get to see the test case scenarios across this four usefulness, we see that a chi-square is the the analysis that would be best fit for this type of question. Um, so here's how we read the result, because oftentimes we work a lot with descriptive statistics or we work with modeling, but there's not the happy medium of chi-squares, although evaluators do work a lot with categorical data. There isn't a lot of chi-square statistics. So although this may sound a little bit basic, I'd like to backtrack a little. So because it runs a little against intuition, so a significant result, so a p-value below zero point 0.5 would mean that performance is tied to a challenge type. So some good at some kinds of problems and weak at others. Again, this is the significant result. And non-significant result, so above 0.05, as we all most likely know, means a non-detectable relationship. What does this mean? A performance doesn't hinge on the category. So in this case, a non-significant is the good outcome because it means that these metrics are able to act independently upon the 16 case scenarios. And the reason we were so adamant on seeing this independence was because of the synthetic nature of the data. We wanted to prove that these were able to be independent from one another. Um, but the dependence is mostly what we found. So out of the 14 dimensions that we see on the table here, 11 showed no significant variation by category. So when we looked at the case scenarios that were constructed by TrueNorth in its very first iteration, as we explained in the session yesterday, TrueNorth performed consistently, which we also mentioned yesterday, but in the second session we get the chance to elaborate on what this means a little further. So whether it was handling a mentorship question or a burnout question as the examples that Joanne just shared in the slide previous, it was enacting some, it was an AC in some categories and it was falling apart in others. There are three dimensions that they vary significantly: relatability, personal engagement, and I think these are all here, the p-values that we see right here: relatability, personal engagement, and inclusive community. Now there's two, and those are exactly where we focus on improvement, or where we kind of set up as the foundation when we kind of set it as to continue with the evaluation with human participants, knowing those were the significant results. But there's two honest caveats to this approach, because the first one is that consistency is not the first, is thus the same thing as quality. This tells us that the tool is stable across challenge types, is consistent in terms of its usefulness, is consistent across its goal facilitation and trustworthiness and accessibility, with the caveat that this is synthetic data. But it does not tell us if the answers are good enough. Good in the sense of use that we discussed yesterday, and yesterday we had a very productive discussion about what does use mean when we evaluate these tools with human participants. A tool can be uniformly not as good or uniformly perfect, but the chi-square can't really tell these things apart, which again, this question of the chi-square not being able to tell these things apart is what motivated us to continue with this evaluation with human participants. Second, the test assumes a healthy number of observation in each cell. That is the foundation, the 101 of a chi-square. But with 116 cases, that isn't necessarily the case when we spread across the 116 cases across these metrics. So this is a very honest limitation, statistical limitation of this very first foundation. But it is the one that helped us see what can we get from this in a very useful sense. Um, so knowing that the tool is consistent, but know whether it actually helps a real person is exactly what we paired this automated study with the human-centered study from our session yesterday. But this is kind of the sense of how the data was constructed, and then me coming into this collaboration just to kind of make sense of it, just to parse out the useful foundation ways to carry on with different evaluation approaches. It was the seed of this collaboration, and it's kind of where we continuously come back from as we discuss future relations and future uses of a career-based AI system. But can also be the process, as I think more to about this, for any other AI system or chatbot that has some sort of social good outcome or component to it. And to kind of bounce back between one type of expertise thinking of the other. The more we've thought about these conversations, and the more that I poached Joanne to think about the outcomes, how this can help people, and like to think about the specific like age ranges, and to think about what specific things they would like people to learn. We've kind of not tweak but develop the social gut mission as to what does it mean to develop the system. And so I think now there are like three main goals, so I'll pass it back to Joanne to kind of like take us all the way back to the bigger picture of where do we want to take this to.
Oh, thank you so much, Sonia. Yeah, before we go on to talk about our future goals, I think it's important to circle back and talk about the mission of True North and our motivations behind this project. So, in the field of STEM, we are here to discuss what has been dubbed the leaky pipeline, which is the phenomenon in which STEM graduates successfully earn their STEM degrees. However, a significant number of these individuals end up leaving their STEM careers in the early stages of their professional journey. A lot of research has shown that this isn't due to lack of technical ability. It's more due to factors such as isolation, lack of mentorship, uncertainty about their career path, workplace challenges, maintaining a sense of belonging and purpose in this field. So these factors do have consequences on both the individual and societal level. So organizations, they end up losing skilled talent. Innovation in our country slows down, and individuals end up leaving their careers that they invested so much time to build. So that was the motivation behind True North. So regarding support, we're not looking to replace human mentors at all. Our goal is to provide a accessible, discrete mentoring resource that can supplement existing support systems, especially for historically underrepresented groups in STEM. This potential for mentorship can be a very sparse network, meaning it may take a considerable amount of time to find appropriate mentor for early career STEM professionals, especially those that can relate to the background that that individual is coming from. Um, so that motivates the design of our system, which not only just considers professional achievement, but utilizes the Permaform framework to help individuals build professional relationships, meaning mindset, workplace environment, and economic security. All of these factors are really important with long-term career retention and satisfaction. So, regarding the low cost and scalable design of True North, career consulting and career coaching can often have a high barrier of entry. You have to know somebody, or you might need to have the funds to be able to access that resource. So, we really wanted to make sure that the design of our system could reach people who face the greatest barriers. So, historically underrepresented groups in STEM, they frequently encounter additional challenges in their career development related to mentorship access and workplace belonging. These issues are very complex and do require institutional support and solutions. However, we hope that True North provides one tool that an individual can have in their toolkit to reduce some of the institutional support gaps by having accessible evidence-based guidance whenever it is needed from the convenience of a phone. I guess with regards to scale, because this is mentioned in this slide, so traditional mentoring programs are valuable, but they're also incredibly resource intensive. As I mentioned before, mentors, especially for underrepresented groups in STEM, there's very rarely enough mentors in an institution to meet demand, especially as STEM workforces continue to grow. So we do realize and know that AI systems cannot completely replace human relationships, but they can dramatically increase access to guidance, reflection, and support between mentoring interactions, specifically in that gap before an individual reaches out to HR or a similar resource for additional support. So that is the opportunity that we're trying to address with TrueNorth, a low-cost and scalable approach that combines peer-reviewed knowledge, a reg retrieval, a retrieval-augmented generation system, as well as workplace psychology principles to help more early career professionals stay engaged and grow professionally and ultimately stay in their STEM careers. So we're really trying to use AI to help talented people navigate the societal challenges that often cause them to leave STEM. And we do hope we can strengthen the future STEM workforce. Yes, and I'll pass it back to Sonia to continue the presentation.
So, another interesting aspect that has happened with this collaboration is that the word evaluation in the dictionary has a lot of meanings. So does the word of assessment, so does the word of measurement, the word of accountability, the word of measurement. Um, and kind of like us trying to explain what it means to us from one another has led to a lot of useful insights. And a lot of different ways that on our end of program evaluation, we don't necessarily consider on how to assess monitoring and assessment. But there has been an interesting branch which is design science research, which one of the panelists here has been very interested in pursuing, and I think this as a future direction can allow us to see more of the use aspect, more of the trust aspect, and more of the functioning aspect, and continuing to like further strengthening this pillar of the cross-disciplinary collaboration that we've created. Kind of accidentally, now a little bit more intentionally, but I would ask Kashu to elaborate a little bit further on this design science research approach that could potentially give further information as to how an AI chatbot on early career retention could help professionals and how it can help the assessment of the field.
Thank you, Sonia. So as you could see from talking about the evaluation and the mission in general, the evaluation established a strong baseline here with 11 out of 14 metrics showing no significant category-dependent variation, as Sonia explained. But then we did have those three metrics that did, which were the relatability, personal visual engagement, and inclusive community. And design science research is unique in that it gives us a framework to treat those not as limitations, but instead as design opportunities and the starting point for a next build and evaluate cycle within TrueNorth. So talking a little about what design science research is, as Sonia already mentioned, it comes from information systems and it is focused on generating knowledge through artifact construction and evaluation. And where it fits so well is that evaluation is really central within design science research. The artifacts that you have can be constructs, models, methods, or instantiations. And we have TrueNorth as an instantiation artifact here, addressing the really relevant problem of STEM attrition that Joan talked about a little bit. We have that clearly defined real-world problem. We also have a novel artifact with TrueNorth itself, and we have that theoretically grounded knowledge base through PERMA plus 4. So as I mentioned, critically, the evaluation in design science research is not a one-time endpoint, but instead it is fully embedded in the research process itself. And this sort of reframes the current results that we have with our paper, with the evaluation, with the first user study, as those are not conclusions, but they are a baseline and starting point for the next cycle. And so some of the next steps that we are planning to do would be a human-in-the-loop evaluation, expanding our knowledge base, and then also tracking longitudinal retention outcomes. So first of all, redesigning some modules that are maybe responsible for inconsistency in some of our parts of the evaluation. Then as well, having that human in the loop evaluation with STEM professionals, and then also doing a longitudinal study. And the end goal of this would be to have generalizable design principles for Perma Plus for grounded AI mentoring systems that would also be transferable beyond STEM and beyond that specific area. So it can be used with a wider range of problems, solving those. So DSR treats that prototype that we have now not as a finished product, but rather as a research instrument and something that we continue to build and evaluate in order to learn. And each evaluation cycle that we are planning to do generates more knowledge about what it means to design those AI systems that are in service of human flourishing in those high stakes professional contexts that we have here. And that is the contribution that we are working towards. And since design science research really very well combines information systems and then also psychology and the evaluation aspect here, it is a great example of how cross-discipline collaboration is very valuable here. And so I'll pass it back to Sonia to talk a little bit more about what we are planning to do and how cross-discipline collaboration fits very well in this case.
Thank you, Katja. So before I go on to the next slide, a few key terms that are just so prominent in both fields is the sense of loops, and program development and evaluations being iterative, being cyclical, kind of like informing from learning from information. So what we've learned is that we kind of take like those common terms or those common branches, that we kind of have some sort of understanding, whether the execution may be a little bit differently, and then just go from there just to see what kind of fits the larger goal. And then to complement those things, there are two main contributions. The first one is that of building a logic model. So that is a logic model in the sense that program evaluators understand it, which I will explain in a second. And then the second one kind of further expands on the conclusion that I closed the session yesterday, which is that of a mixed methods approach. Because we got to talk a little bit about in the session yesterday when we specifically talked about the evaluation with the human participants, how a lot of our conclusions and suggestions in terms of use mostly came from the qualitative responses. Um, so first, let's backtrack everything that I just said and then say that the first way of anchoring both disciplines is in a shared logic model. So we started this presentation with the RAG figure that Katja walked us through very thoroughly. These kind of have this sense of the way we understand logical model in the terms of inputs, activities, outputs, short-term outcomes, sometimes immediately intermediate outcomes, long-term outcomes, program impact. Um, so a logic model is just the map from inputs, activities to intended outcomes, like I just mentioned. And its real power here is that it forces both science, so computer science, program evaluation, also psychology, to define success the same way. So it grounds everyone in their different understandings of what a system can be and what a system should be and its future directions because it has the outcomes aspect. It let us connect develop persistent outputs. So like I mentioned, the ones that we explained at the very beginning, grounding, retrieval accuracy, consistency to the evaluators and the social science and the social good aspect of outcomes of interest. This could be trust, support, professional agency, tapping into that social good support and that social good campaign that Joanne explained later on the presentation. Um, Without that share map, although that collaboration could happen, um, people who are in the process of developing the systems uh, optimize one thing and then the evaluators measure for another thing. So without this logic model, we can have the risk of there being a mismatch. Um, and then you can never kind of have that grounding conversation. Um, And then the second contribution that I have here on the slide is the integration of process and outcome data. With the caveat that the way I understand process and outcome data is a little bit different from the way process and outcome data has been described by Katja and Joanne. But this isn't novel to us from the very foundational classes of program evaluation, social science program evaluation. Um, it's just how we kind of learn that every time we look at a program, we need to look at its process outcomes and their outcome measures. Um, so studies consistently pair quantitative outcome measures with qualitative process data. And then that mixed methods approach that I mentioned when I introduced this slide. So triangulating pre-post results with interviews and conversation analysis. This has been done in the literature, um, where a few papers, um, excuse me, I'm coming down from a really bad allergy episode. Um, this has done um, by a few papers in the literature, but that they have evaluated prior chatbots, and this isn't completely novel. We see this all the way from 2018. Um, and so Inkster and colleagues did it with the WISA Wellbeing chatbot. Morello and colleagues did it with the suite of cross-management system chatbots in 2021. And Liu and colleagues did it again with smoking cessation agent, again in 2021. So that pairing of like numbers plus narratives is essentially the relationship of the first foundational TrueNorth evaluation and the human subjects evaluation that we described yesterday with the other evaluation PhD students. There is, however, a third potential contribution, which is to positioning evaluators upstream. When I mean evaluators, I mean social science evaluators, the ones who kind of are attending and organizing the Glocal session. So traditionally, evaluators assess a finished intervention. Most sense, not really. Um, but when we embed a mixed methods inquiry during the development, it surfaces decide and trust outcomes that they can still change and build. So this taps into that iterative process of the design science research that Katja just explained a few minutes ago. Um, a few paper from a paper from 2025, so Mullen and colleagues show clearly early. So bringing the mental health professionals and to critically examine chatbots as to what design or code problems to end the test that they would have. So that shift from summative to formative is at the heart of what we're arguing for. That when the more we're embedded into this collaboration, we go into this sense of, for those of you who are not familiar with summative versus formative, um, I think the first nature of this collaboration, which is what I've been trying to say, is usually to just look at the system at the very end. And then the formative process is just looking at the system as it goes and kind of like slowly testing it with a few participants and kind of like implementing the methods that are the most appropriate as it continues to go. Um, so the fourth move is kind of like a rewarding from what I just mentioned, which is to treat the tool as an evolving program, not a finished product, because changes will continue to happen as needs continue to resurface. So yesterday when we talked about the results from the 8 participants on the pre 2 weeks of use and post, we saw that the way that people understood early career development, especially at the college level stage, um, they kind of wanted more than working opportunities. They wanted this tool to be more of a job site searching. And that means that then TrueNorth is not a finished product, but it can lead to it's an evolving program or it can lead to continuous stages. Um, so design science built evaluate, refine cycle can keep both system performance and participant experience in view with every iteration. And then that's consistent with a lot of approaches that we know in our field of program evaluation. So system metrics and participation data answer only half of the question. A shared logic model is what lets the two disciplines measure at the same constructs from both sides and leads that grounding of that understanding. So on my end, I see that as the next like crucial step should this collaboration flourish into further steps. Um, and then a mixed methods is what makes those measures actually usable in the iterative sense and the cyclical sense. That is just so naturally embedded into how computer systems are evaluated. Um, that kind of reaches the end of this conversation. This was meant to be more of a reflective, insights conversation when we brought like the main pillars of this year-long process. Um, Now we can leave the open floor for questions, and then I'll transition to Dr. Yan Lee, who, as I introduced her in the beginning, she's a professor of computer science and technology at Claremont Graduate University. And would like to thank Dr. Lee for taking the time to be here with us and kind of moderate our informal conversation.
Okay, thank you. Yes, great presentations. I first want to ask our audience, do you guys have questions? Please welcome to ask questions because I think your question would be much more interesting. Hello? Like I saw Nan. Nan, you are here. Do you have any questions? You learned GenAI class. What, you took a GenAI class. Do you have any questions from this? Can they speak? Unmute?
No questions, thank you.
No questions?
Yeah.
How about anyone else? Huh? Now at this moment. Okay. Well, so yeah, so I kind of want to kind of reflect. So let me do a poll, like everyone. I want to say, how many people have a information systems and technology background in the audience here? Who? Do you want to raise the hand? Who has a IS and technology, computer science background, other than our presenters? The audience, none is the only one. Oh, Mark. Okay. So two. So how about the rest? So the rest are more on the psychology evaluation background. What's your background? Who else has more, like the rest of the participants has more psychology or evaluation background? Program evaluation? No? What's the background? Because I want to see the, do you know? Do you guys know?
It looks like Y Win was in computer science many years
Okay.
ago. Yes. And I'm guessing now you're in program evaluation.
Me many years ago in computer science. Now in what? Now, so why win? So what are you
I
now?
I did maths first and then the computer science. That
Mm-hmm.
was in many years. And
Mm-hmm.
then I changed to accounting and I changed to conflict prevention and peace building. At the
Okay.
moment, I'm in the private sector,
You're in
but
private
I
sector.
did the evaluation as part of my research, yes.
Okay, so evaluation for you is more program-based evaluation, right?
Yeah, that's
So
right, like a
evaluate
project outcomes, yeah.
interventions. Yeah. Okay. So then I want to like really want our, so students, because it's truly cross-disciplinary how they collaborated. Because you guys also later reflect on, right? Reflect on the different perspectives. If you go to the talking about the evaluation in design science research versus evaluation when you talk about on like program evaluations. So based on this experience, what have you learned that you previously didn't know before from your field to another? And what enhanced your learning?
I guess I can start. Hi. So this was my first project that had a adjacency to program evaluation. So I've done AI evaluation before, in which there was a fixed data set with labels. It was a very supervised learning, so we were very optimized on accuracy. Two of these labels. We didn't really have a open-ended evaluation where participants were asked to reflect on potential improvements to the system and how that could be incorporated into the next iteration of the design of the system. So I think that is a really important aspect of this particular evaluation that I learned. And due to the agentic nature of the system, it does in fact support these sort of iterative improvements with the design of our evaluation rather than a fixed training method. So that was pretty new to me in terms of a difference between a machine learning evaluation versus a program evaluation. Yes.
I
Mm-hmm.
think in addition to that, just overall, working with Sonia and everyone from evaluation kind of taught me to take a step back, and think more about why we do everything, what is beneficial in which case, because I went into the project thinking, okay, we have TrueNorth, so having this as a design science problem, and research would make a lot of sense. So there are fairly clear steps on how to proceed with an evaluation. But then we met with Sonia, and then in like evaluation specifically and in psychology, there are also other considerations and the way that her team was designing the survey questions and how to approach users and all of that. It was very like there were a lot of like thoughts behind that. So it was really good kind of combining that and then also seeing like we talked about how design science research where evaluation is really important, how it goes together very well. So it showed me that if you just take a step back and like think about what you're doing, what are the reasons, there are a lot of touch points that allow for that cross-discipline collaboration and just more critically looking at different points of what you're doing in your research to then like, improve how you're doing it and getting better results and more in-depth results.
Sonia, how about you? So what's something you learned about design science evaluation?
Metrics and the language of
Okay.
those metrics and how to organize them. I think for us in the way that we've been trained about this field on our side of CGU is the lived experience of how do people actually use these things? Are they having like a good time with it? Are they having a good experience? And then just seeing how everything was built, how the very first evaluation was built, how design science, research and evaluation literature is built, and it's like so clean cut and organized. It's like here's the systems first, here's the resources first, and we need to like make sure to slowly but surely check everything before we continue on with the next stage. So that iterative process is so neatly and cleanly built. That is something that I'll take myself to like other evaluations, even if they don't have like this computer science approach to it.
But so I want to add on that, right? So what you described, because we have a lot of students here. What makes us, I know you refer us as computer science, but CSAT is actually named why we are information systems and technology, not computer science. Because we are not purely computer science in a way that John originally mentioned. When you are doing very algorithmic metrics like, really optimize that numbers to a certain degree, algorithm can be optimized, right? But when you have an algorithm applied in the real world situations, so let's say just even algorithm or anything you're building an information system, you process whatever data, have some output. This GenAI system will process users, have certain questions, GenAI will produce an output. Inevitably, there's the human components of it, right? So how to say that, what you described earlier, that the building process, you it is within information systems, you do have certain matrices for the evaluation in a sense that we call that functional evaluation. I think we discussed it, is really to ensure the system are functioning as we designed to do. However, a system functioning as whatever the designer tried to do, not necessarily, as you earlier said, you also want to have that mental model or like logical model connection, not necessarily will be perceived by user the same way. Because in the end, right, the different user have a different kind of way to view things. That's where although it's very, first of all, it's very important for us to demonstrate our system design as designer intentions. But when we also need to have another evaluation, which is the whole system level evaluation utility that actually by nature in design science, it requires human involvement, information systems. So it's that distinguishes us from the computer science, because computer science, if you look at their paper, often they really don't care about human input. They were like, I have this algorithm, you human use it, then you figure out whether it's useful or can be applied or not. So in that case, there's actually a lot of similarity with with what you guys described in the evaluation. But I'm not a evaluation expert. So, but my understanding when you do program evaluation, you are viewing a program as an intervention, right? Then you are just measure the effect of the intervention. Does it achieve what it does? On a surface level, that's my understanding because the reason then I have done similar experience would be I have a nonprofit. We're building a technology artifact that is designed what we to do, but that technology artifact when implemented in the real world has human using it. There's a lot of almost when we implement that, like try to deliver that technology to the people, it becomes a program. It's like people using it. Then it have before they use the technology, after use the technology. There could be also longitudinal. So there's quite a lot of, then we view that whole thing actually is a program. Then we're gonna see when we do that, does that achieve its intentions, right? So technology is supposed to help you to do this, but does humans really use it? Does humans think it's useful? And that's a lot of evaluation. So I do see that as so if you guys, the reason you like from evaluation helped Joan and Katya's team is you probably viewed TrueNorth as a intervention tool, right? And user, I bet a lot of your research are doing that, then the end users to see that components. So that made I do appreciate that's a lot of more rigorous evaluation add in to what design science research folks already know. The reason because no one can be good at everything. And when they're already good at designing and building things, it's no way they have even not only right the resources, including not only the knowledge, but also the time and other things to do that. So that's where I really see the nature of the good collaboration. So, but then the next question I want to ask, because you guys have a lot of technical details there. So I have the following because so kind of so I know there's some other evaluations are planned for the next iteration, right? Yes. Um, but you were saying that, what if like you have some qualitative data you have collected about what user wants through the evaluation, but usually we often happens to that. Then when we do have open-end evaluations, including when we have quantitative measures, but also open ends. But when you collect certain open-end questions coming back, saying, oh, user will say, I want this, I want that. But then there's also your tool have its own design goals. So when that happens, if there's any conflict or certain things, how are you going to address that? This actually often happens. I'm currently doing a test out a tool that has a specific design objectives, but the user coming would say, "Oh, can you add this because I want to do this?" Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so okay, originally when we had designed TrueNorth, when we met by early career, we were expecting to mostly evaluate users who had already started working and were starting their careers. They had entered their first job and they were placing their footing in their first industry setting. So this was the original design of TrueNorth. However, there was a bit of a conflict with the users of TrueNorth that we intended to design for and the people that were most interested in using TrueNorth. The early career STEM professionals that were most interested in using TrueNorth were not those who had already started their first job in the STEM industry. We had a lot of interest from honestly, students, yeah, students who were interested in or still working towards getting that first placement, securing that first job. So there was a lot of attention on career advancement in the sense of getting their foot in the door, not so much establishing themselves yet. I'm sure I would hope that they would want to do that like after they place their standing, but there was a big emphasis or like strong desire of not just help with mentorship, but also assistance with seeking and finding those opportunities to get their foot in the door. And that is not really a conflict, but more of an unexpected result of our first evaluation. So we do have to overhaul our system design to accommodate this interest. But overall, like it's really exciting to know that we have this feedback from actual users. And it's also part of the nature of system design and design science. So it's pretty exciting. Yes.
Yeah, great. We are like running out of time, right?
True. Oh yeah, we are running out of time.
Sorry everyone for your time.
Yes. Um,
Well, with that, I would like to thank Dr. Yant Lee for those incredibly rich insights at the end. I feel like that was the perfect caramelized cherry on top to our presentation. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you to Joanne and Katya for taking the time. All four of us are in different time zones, so it really was a feat to coordinate this, but I'm really appreciative that we really took the hour to reflect back on this collaboration, what it meant for all of us personally, professionally, for understanding of this big word of evaluation. And one last thank you to everyone in attendance and to everyone who may be watching this recording in the future. I may stop the recording.
Thank you. And I have a question. You can stop the recording. That's fine.